Hello, this is Craig with RedChip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with Nexalin Technology, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker NXL. With us today, we have Mark White, President and CEO of Nexalin. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we'll open the event to your questions. I will keep everyone's lines muted throughout the presentation. Users may reach Mark at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window and typing in their question. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical fact should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. I now turn the webinar over to Mark. Please go ahead.
Okay, hello, Craig, and hello, everyone. Again, as Craig mentioned, my name is Mark White. I am the CEO of Nexalin Technology, trading under NXL on the Nasdaq. So I've done several of these webinars with RedChip over the last year. I've done some pre-recorded, some live webinars, and I know that today there are several of you that have been on with me before, and several of you have email addresses that reach members of my staff, and some of you have my email directly and have asked for a little better sort of perspective on the industry as a whole and not so much the continual Nexalin presentation. So what I'm going to try to do today is sort of balance out my message. And for those that have never listened to myself or are completely unaware of Nexalin Technology, let me just go ahead and start there. So what everyone on this call has in common is we all know someone that's struggling with some type of a mental health disorder, some type of a quality life disorder related to the health of their brain, or some type of a parent or an older member of the family that may be suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's and some cognitive decline. And what all of this has in common is the health of the brain. And currently, we all know that the only standard of care that's really available, especially from an insurance reimbursement standpoint, is medication. And we know very well that medication has two really significant challenges. Number one is the efficacy. How well do you respond? We know science indicates lots of data that really only about 4 in 10, about 40%, when you really crunch the real numbers and you really look at the aggregate of the data, medications in the psychiatric world for mental health, whether it's for children, adults, or parents, older geriatric patients, you only see about a 40% response. But what's much more significant about medication as far as a challenge is the side effect profile. We are somewhat immune to side effects, or we're not very sensitive to it because it's all over our television, it's all over our magazines, it's all over the information. When you go to Walgreens, you get 3 pages of information. My point is, look, medication's not working. We have a global mental health epidemic. More people are getting sick than are getting better. And the ones that are not getting better is because of the medication. Yes, there's talk therapy. Yes, there's meditation. Yes, there's yoga. But let's just kind of stay with the general problem, the global epidemic, that more people are suffering from mental health issues than are not. All right, so what Nexalin Technology is in the business of is, first of all, rather than understanding the symptoms of depression, anxiety, insomnia, we are in the business of identifying the underlying source of the issue in the brain. In other words, what's causing depression? What's causing anxiety? What's causing insomnia? And all of these other issues. How about traumatic brain injury? When the brain is injured in some sort of an accident, whether it's military or football or the children at the playground, how does that injury develop in the brain, and how do we help the brain heal and recover? And this is where Nexalin Technology comes in. And I want to take just a moment to let all of you know during the next few minutes, I'm going to try to help us understand not only what Nexalin is, why Nexalin is different, but something that's really important is there is a lot of noise out there, especially to you as investors. A lot of companies are out there with these, some call them toys, these battery operated devices that are privately held companies that are making some really wild statements about their products and technologies. And it's confusing, not only to the patients, to the consumers, but to all of you as an investor. What I think is really important is for me to help us all understand that, first of all, Nexalin is a public company. And it is extremely important that what I say to you is based on fact, that I have data, that I have evidence, and that I have solid executive experience to make the statements that I will make during these next few minutes, and that I'm not able to paint some sort of a picture for you that's based on some kind of a fantasy or a vision of saving the world. So let's come back to what is Nexalin. So your brain, my brain, all of our brains is basically working on frequencies and hormones. Some say electrical and chemical. And what our pharmaceuticals would have us believe is that if the brain is chemically altered because you're having a mental health issue, that they can chemically alter medication, the chemically altered brain, and expect it to be normal. And this is where the issue begins, because that's simply not true. If it was, we would see a much better response and we would not have all the side effects. So Nexalin's technique is, look, if the brain is basically an organic computer, and so we have this head full of tissue and neurons full of electrical energy, and it's processing information, life on life's terms, quality of life, decisions, fight or flight. You've heard all these techniques. At the end of the day, the idea would be, all right, why do we need to do shock therapy and create convulsions in the brain? Why do we need to put medication in the brain that chemically alters the brain to where you can barely stand the side effect profile and you may or may not get any benefit? Why do we need to spend 30 or 40 hours and thousands of dollars in a therapy room talking about our problem when at the end of the day, it's a health issue of the brain? So let's start talking about talking to the brain or working with the brain with electrical frequencies that are completely undetectable. You cannot feel it. And because you can't feel it, the brain is able to allow these signals to penetrate much deeper into the brain, because the brain itself has a small area behind the eyes, between the ears, called the midbrain. This is where the control center of the brain is. And all these other technologies that you're hearing about, whether it's on TV, magazines, investor memos, et cetera, are all basically trying to get to the deep center of the brain, but they can't because they're limited by various types of side effects, skin irritations, the patient's discomfort, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where Nexalin steps away from every other neurostimulator out there. We stimulate neurons with a natural electrical energy that's already in the brain. It stimulates a chemical balancing response so that that chemically altered brain can begin to normalize its health, which means that the symptoms of anxiety, depression, insomnia, stroke, and other issues will begin to fall away. So specifically what we're doing is we have created in a very complicated computer design, a way to send a signal to the organic computer, your brain, that basically resets it. Reset and reboot. We all know those terms because we're always resetting and rebooting our computers. And we all know that when you reset and reboot your computer, what are you doing? You're flushing out the RAM, which is the recent memory of all the activity that you've done. So we flush out the RAM and we reset the networks, and then we turn it on and everything works. What I'm proposing to you, what if you could reset these areas of the brain in a natural, safe, and effective manner, and that you could reduce depression by 70 to 90%, and you could help to children to study and to pay attention. You could begin to see a decline in the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm going to come to all that in a minute. But the idea here is to use a natural energy pattern that's completely undetectable to the brain so that you can increase the power, so that you can penetrate deep in the brain without the patient experiencing any side effect profile or feeling any type of power or experiencing any discomfort. And that's Nexalin Technology. This is a breakthrough moment in mental health care. We're a public company that has spent millions of dollars on research and development. We're spending millions of dollars in very high level, qualified research, controlled, blinded clinical trials in leading neuropsychiatric centers all over the world to establish this safe treatment. The next step, how do you get it to the patient? You get it to the patient in a wearable headset. For those of you that have me on video, you can see that I'm holding a headset. And you can see where I'm pointing now is an area that houses a computer on a flexible PCB board. We have two more PCB boards in the housing behind the ear. And what this is called the halo. So for those of you that can see me, you can see that I've put it on my head just like a halo. For those that are not seeing me and listening to me, just imagine a halo where I have pads on my forehead and pads behind my ear, and I'm able to administer this treatment and control it through an app that controls the power, the time, the frequency, and the app communicates with servers in the cloud, and the servers in the cloud communicate with the doctors on the ground in the portal. So now we take this state-of-the-art digital treatment, we put it into a digital environment so that the entire procedure, the process, the diagnosis, every aspect of the treatment is managed, subscribed, or prescribed and monitored through a digital ecosystem by a competent medical professional. This takes medical clearance by the FDA. We are in the middle of FDA clinical trials and negotiating with the FDA for insomnia. We're designing depression trials, and I'm going to talk to you about Alzheimer's dementia here in a minute. The idea here is to change the entire dynamics of mental health treatment. No more medication, drug-free. No more side effects. No more psychiatric visits to the clinic. No more psychiatric visits to receive treatment. Everything is done diagnostically over the phone with a medical professional that then creates a protocol that he uploads to the cloud, that's downloaded to the app, that's communicated into the headset. What I'm telling you is this is the future of mental health care. It is the safest, most effective treatment that I'm aware of. Yes, I'm the CEO. Yes, my job is to be successful and to share that success with all of you. But what's more important is that everything that I'm telling you is based on published clinical evidence. I'm not telling you what I'm going to do. I'm not telling you that I'm going to have a $9,000 treatment or a $400 treatment. I'm not making any statements other than to tell you that we have designed a treatment and a business model and a distribution model that is specific to the current challenges of the industry called mental health treatment. And this is a technique that is primarily focused for us at this point on the primary mood disorders, anxiety, depression, insomnia. We have a division of the company that's focused on the military government, specifically traumatic brain injury and PTSD. We're working with the military, the DoD, UCSD, using fMRI research, good quality clinical data to build an entire military distribution opportunity for veterans that are struggling with PTSD as a result of TBI or other injury related activities to the military. It's important to know that when I tell you about our military advisory board and our military division, that I'm not telling you what I'm going to do. I've spent 35 days worth of meetings on Capitol Hill talking to sitting senators, talking to Health and Human Services, talking to the DOD. We're working on a very strategic long-term plan. This is not a short-term quick fix. Some do these little one-off studies with police departments, or they say they've got somebody that's working with them in the military. What I'm trying to tell you is that we've built an entire division of the company devoted to the military. And the next area of the company that's of real interest right now is going to be the Alzheimer's dementia challenge. So we all know that Alzheimer's dementia is a major debilitating cognitive decline disease that affects a lot of our loved ones. We also know that at this point, there really isn't a successful treatment that's safe and effective. We know that there are 2 or 3 medications that have gone through the FDA that have horrible, horrible side effects and are mildly effective. And what Nexalin has done is, once again, remember that our whole entire mission is to understand the cause of these diseases. And so if the cause of Alzheimer's dementia, which most believe is tied to a plaque buildup in the brain, basically the brain's inability to release toxic materials, and ultimately it creates cognitive decline, loss of memory, etc. Well, what we know about the brain is that it responds to specific frequencies and in very specific ways. We know that there are areas of the brain that respond to those specific frequencies. So what we've done is studied this dementia, and what the general scientific community believes is that this plaque buildup is the cause of cognitive decline and dementia. So what we've done is studied how do we stimulate the neurons to create a metabolic cleansing. In other words, how do we tell the brain to clean itself like it does when it's asleep? So, because what we're doing, most of you probably know that when you sleep, yes, you need the rest, but more importantly, the body needs to release the toxic material from the cellular activity of the day. And what we're doing is going, all right, if the purpose of a metabolic cleansing is to clean the toxicity associated with plaque buildup, which seems to contribute to dementia, what if we could stimulate deep into those areas of the brain, the structures, hypothalamus, pituitary, amygdala? What if we could stimulate that deep area of the brain and create a natural metabolic cleansing, which would then slow down, if not eliminate, the progression of the disease? And then if we could put that into an imaging model, and we could also study patient response, in other words, what's the behavior of the patient? Are they slowing down their cognitive decline, or is it possibly improving? Is the blood flow in the brain associated with dementia improving? These are all areas of research that is in our first 2 publications on Alzheimer's dementia. So we are building a portfolio of evidence, and we are in collaboration with the federal government at the FDA on the design and implementation of a clinical track to receive approval for Alzheimer's and dementia. So what I just did is I ran through 3 different areas of focus that is very specific to the company: your traditional mental health, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, insomnia; your military track for traumatic brain injury, stroke, PTSD; and now our track for Alzheimer's dementia. And this is where the focus of the company is. For those of you that want to read my press releases and look at the data, go to the website, nexalin.com, Nexalin.com. And you'll see that we have hard evidence that is laying the groundwork for a long-term clinical strategy in these 3 areas that are so important. I'm not doing pilot trials with hospitals. I'm not doing pilot trials with police departments. I'm doing structured, large, blinded, controlled clinical trials We've published 11 clinical trials in the last 24 months with universally known, recognized, peer-reviewed journals. So what I'm doing today, and you can hear my conviction is I understand that there's a lot of information in this wearable technology world, in this mental health treatment world. What I'm telling you is that Nexalin Technology is in a lane all to itself. This is the future of mental health care. Not only the treatment, but the ability to deliver the treatment, to manage the treatment in a digital environment. There are going to be more restrictions placed by our federal government on treating mental health with these wearable devices. It's coming. And Nexalin is involved not only in all the areas clinically that I've mentioned, but we're also very strategic in our business model. This is a long-term project, and it's really extremely important that we are able to understand that as regulatory enhancement are created by the federal government to monitor these technologies, because it's coming, that we are ready with the clinical evidence, we are ready with the quality systems, we are ready with the quality of our regulatory model. We are ready with our federal filings with the federal government as a public company. Everything that we need to protect this company and to continue to build a scalable business model to tackle the mental health global epidemic is where we're at. And so this is the message that I had today, was to come in and basically let you know who the company is, why we're different, why we're not doing what you'll read out there in some of these other magazines and other journals. My recommendation is to follow Nexalin, look at the clinical trials, look at the press releases, and you'll go, okay, it's really apparent where they're taking the company. They're being very conservative in their use of their capital. So we're being very careful on how and when we deploy capital into clinical work. We are currently cleared in China and Asia for depression and insomnia. We're building up the distribution models. We should start seeing revenue start ticking up here as early as Q4 of 25, maybe Q1 26. We've got the same opportunities that have developed in the Middle East. We've cleared there. We recently announced clearance in Brazil for the South America markets. So between the South America markets, the Middle East markets, the Asian markets, and now the American and European markets, FDA CE, you'll see that I'm playing the long-term game. My goal here is to build quality clinical evidence for the establishment of what is a breakthrough technology in the mental health epidemic. We are manufacturing the Halo headsets. The apps have been released. The clinical trial is underway in California with the military. We will start the second clinical trial for the FDA. We're planning on that in the next probably 60 to 90 days. Everything is on track that I've been talking to you about. There's been some slight 30-day, 60-day delays on design improvements and enhancements in the digital systems. All of our entire clinical trial model is based on electronic data capturing so that patients no longer have to go into an academic institution or a doctor's office to receive treatment. The UCSD study, we're really optimistic about the military. This will be the second military study. So that's Nexalin Technology. I could go on for another hour on the technology, but basically what I thought I'd do today is I'm coming up on, that's 40 minutes, or no, that's 25 minutes. And I'd like to use the next 20 minutes or so for questions with Craig and his team that will allow you to type in, I think, questions. And I'll answer any questions that you have. If you have questions about other technologies, other strategies that some are using, I'm happy to address that. I'm happy to answer questions about our clinical models. I'm happy to give you manufacturing updates. And if there's any other specific questions that you want to You want to get in my head and ask me why or what am I doing? Feel free. The next 20 minutes is open and I'm available.
Thank you very much, Mark. To speak to Mark, you can push the raise hand button down at the bottom of your Zoom window, and then I have to give permission to speak. Then you have to unmute your line. Then you can speak to Mark. And many people have already typed in their question. To do that, push the Q&A button, click on the Q&A button, and type in your question into the text box. Mark, when do you anticipate FDA clearance to go to market?
So best case is 12 to 14 months. Worst case is 16 to 18 months. But the second part, there's two questions there. When do you expect to clear the FDA and when do you expect to go to market? I'm going to start selling product and start distributing on current clearance and current technology over the next 60 to 90 days and should see that increase gradually over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks, Mark. Will you offer a money-back guarantee if the patient doesn't get the desired results?
So I sure wish I could. Obviously, we're talking about healthcare. We're also talking about unfortunately, a consumer environment that would never allow for that because we just simply can't look into a consumer's private personal world. What is their emotional relationship like? I mean, are they in an abusive marriage? How much wine do they drink at night before they go to bed? Do they have any type of a narcotics habit? What's the stress level at work? So there's far too many variables here. This is not a quick fix like these pills, like Xanax and some of these other medications, opiates. This is focused on something far more specific. So unfortunately, no.
Thomas, you can speak to Mark now. Please unmute your line.
Yes, Mark, there is a product out of Ireland called Neurovalens. It is a headset. I actually purchased it at $1,200, and you have to buy the electrodes, which are about $40 a month. And I was wondering, if you had any comments.
So yeah, I'm familiar with Neurovalence. I'm familiar with Neuro EMS. I'm familiar with Fisher Wallace. I'm familiar with AlphaStem, David's Delight, and a few others that we're currently monitoring as well. So what I think is the most important thing to know, in order for this treatment to be truly, truly effective for the entire population that experiences the treatment, you need penetration. Penetration into the deep midbrain is the key to the efficacy of the treatment. It has historically been extremely difficult because side effects associated with either power or the chemicals in medication to get to that blood-brain barrier and to really significantly change the underlying cause of these treatments. And this is where Nexalin steps away. What all those technologies I just mentioned are cortical stimulators, meaning the cortex. They stimulate the surface of the brain. And in some cases, you can see some adjustment. It normally doesn't hold for a long time, but there is some response. There's been some response to electrical intervention or electrical treatment for 40 or 50 years. But where Nexalin's focus is basically creating the ability to go much deeper into the brain to create a response for not just the mildly depressed, but major depressed, not just those that are experiencing mild disruptions in quality of life, but those that are suffering cognitive decline from dementia and Alzheimer's and other very difficult situations that are hard to treat. This is a very, very complicated medical device that is in its own league at this point, and we will continue to occupy that statement until we see differently.
Well, I've had both treatments, and I do agree that your product is the better one. I've been treating myself for insomnia for a number of years.
Um, Thank you, Thomas, for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that. You must have received treatment out in California or one of the other one of the other clinics, and the product has gotten even better since you probably received it. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. David, please speak to Mark. David.
You're on mute, David.
Okay, David Sutherland, just stand by. We'll go to one of the written in questions. Mark, what frequency does Nexalin use? Are there different frequencies? Does the Nexalin halo stimulate the vagus nerve?
Vagus nerve. Let me do this. Okay. So we're using our primary frequency was 77.5. 77.5 was used because we have a very specific neurochemical response related to dopamine and serotonin. Now, as we moved into other types of disease or injury, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, as I mentioned earlier, the neurons in the brain will respond to different frequencies in different ways. And so, yes, what we are doing is looking at different frequencies, which are patented and protected with our technology, ranging from 4 hertz, which is a metabolic cleansing frequency, 40 hertz, which is a regenerative frequency, and 77.5 hertz, which is a neurochemical response frequency. And once again, this is what sets Nexalin apart from all the others out there, is our ability to not only have current new intellectual protection, but also the subset of patents at different frequencies for different diseases that are all clinically based. David, I see you've got your mute off.
Yes, Mark, in the old Gen 1 approach, you had so many treatments for a certain length of time, and then you were done with the process. Now you're going to a subscription model. Can you discuss that a little bit? What's the necessity of the subscription model?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great question, David. And I'll tell you, I just touched on it a moment ago about the money back guarantee. So what we have found is, as a society, and our research indicates this, and other research indicates this, is that we're a quick fix society. As an example, you go on a diet, you lose 80 pounds. 80% of the consumers that go on a diet and lose 80 pounds will gain 80 or 100 back within 24 months, because unfortunately we don't change our lifestyle or our behavior, so we relapse into the old behaviors. Well, when we're suffering with depression, what we know already, or insomnia or one of these other disorders, is that the brain or the individual itself is sensitive to their environment, which affects their mental health. So what we believe is that we can literally begin this reset with this, especially with the 15 milliamp, what we now call the Halo. And David, the Gen 3, which is going to be the new, in addition to the Halo, will be the clinical device called the Sync. And so these are at 15 milliamps, and we know that there's a dramatic response. It's what I was just referring to with Thomas. I think, David, you're very familiar with what I'm describing. And the idea here is to offer the patient the opportunity to not have to invest in a sequence of treatments or a 15 or 20 minute, 15 or 20 session treatment protocol every 18 to 24 months because their condition reoccurs. The idea is to take it from a treatment and to a management type of technology. So we felt like the most efficient way to do that was to have a high level supervision, because it's still a medical device, with a very low monthly subscription, so that once you go through the initial treatments, the initial oversight by the physician, he can then say, look, you're doing good, keep eating well, and here, I'm going to authorize the device for 6 months of use, and you'll make your monthly usage fee. I'll see you in 6 months and we'll see how you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. What are your plans? What are our plans for an international and domestic proprietary sales force? We have had this discussion in the past, and I strongly advocate for it.
So, two answers. One, obviously, we're leveraging, as this is a digital treatment in a digital environment for distribution. So you leverage as much digital media marketing access as possible. So that is global, and that is different languages. We're involved in several countries right now, and we're helping these other countries develop these websites in other languages. So leveraging digital is a big part of this. As far as a global sales force, so here's what our model is. We, Nexalin, are the experts in the clinical validation, the regulatory clearance, and the research, design, and manufacturing of the technology. And what we do is we look for partnerships, not just client consume, manufacturer distributor, because you become one of them in a million. What we're doing here is finding partners on the global stage that have either networks that are already in place, they're already in this space, or they have the ability based on their networks to build these global distribution models. So the answer to your question, it's a blend. Yes, there will absolutely be sales forces, but they'll be specific to the regions, specific to the economy in those regions, specific to the reimbursement strategies in those regions. And is the demand going to be more for the clinical device, or will it be more for the wearable device, or both? So the answer to your question is yes, except it's and then some by supporting it with a digital model as well that supports each of the distribution sales forces in their respective countries.
Does a patient need a prescription to buy the Halo?
Yes, absolutely. This is a class 2 medical device in America. It is a class 2 device in the Asia markets. It's a class, it's yet to be seen when we apply for the CE mark. We're preparing the design of the trials that will capture not only FDA pilot request data, but also the data needed for the notified bodies in Europe. So yes, this again, this is a really important strategic time for the technology.
Where can we try the Nexalin Halo headset?
So you will start seeing, give it, so our first public clinical trial, the one we're currently involved in, is recruiting out of military and civilians in that community. So the first place to be candidates for that will be probably the insomnia trial that will be a national trial. And what I mean by that is probably 27 out of the primary states in America will allow for recruiting. And I would say follow Nexalin. It'll be on our websites and we'll announce recruiting. And we are using a company that's also a digital CRO. So CRO refers to the organization that will manage the clinical trial. So 90 days, and you would be able to go in and volunteer or apply to be a candidate in the clinical trial. And there is a remuneration, a small fee paid to be a part of that clinical trial. So you could get some money and be a part of the clinical trial to use the Halo and the app and everything. You'll be able to experience the entire system that I've been talking about for the last 18 months with you.
We have time for a few more questions. Just a reminder to submit your question, your written in question, click the Q&A button, and then type in the text box that appears. Mark, do you have a program? Do you have to program the device depending upon desired need of use?
Yes. So depending on, so right now, currently, the two primary protocols that we have are going to be Alzheimer's dementia. I spoke of that earlier. It's a blend of, it's a 60-minute treatment, 20 minutes, 3 different frequencies. There's another one for anxiety and depression, and insomnia. And then the doctor will have the ability to maybe instead of 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Where I'm going here is we're trying to find a balance to make sure the efficacy based on clinical evidence is supported in the protocols. And depending on what the patient's primary reported symptoms are at this point, depression, insomnia, Alzheimer's, dementia, and the third would be TBI and PTSD. Those need to be what we call OTA, which is called over the air. And that's the ability, as I mentioned earlier, for the physician to, we call it the mothership internally. So that's the server, that's what's in the cloud. And the doctor is able to tell the mothership what protocol he wants to place into the headset. And then that is then given to the patient. There is some restriction because this is not just throw a bunch of frequencies at the brain. Again, I want to stress Nexalin has a very robust body of clinical evidence that's peer-reviewed and published. And therefore, we want to, as closely as possible, adhere to those protocols. Let some variables be adjustable based on physician oversight and physician interpretation of symptoms.
Final question, Mark. Who is heading up sales? Are you selling the new Halo device yet?
No, it's still in clinical. We sell in Asia markets. We are about to start selling. We're actually doing some support work, clinical development work in Brazil, and we currently sell in the Middle East. But the Halo itself is new. This is the future of the company, and it is not for sale at this time. It will only be available in a clinical setting, and we don't have any plans to make a direct-to-consumer product at this time, kind of like some of those others that I mentioned earlier. We're going to stay with what we have because this is such a significant breakthrough in safety and efficacy for neurostimulation.
Thank you, Mark. For more information about Nexalin, reach us at 1-800-RED-CHIP or email us at nxl@redchip.com. Please visit RedChip's investor information page for Nexalin. It's nxlinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on Nexalin. Please watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedChip's program featuring exciting small cap companies on Bloomberg USA. Join RedChip's next webinar with Phoenix Motor tomorrow at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Register for all RedChip webinars at redchip.com/events. Thanks again to our many participants today. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.